Yes, ma'am. I am so grateful to have this opportunity to talk about something I feel so passionately about, which is my life's work. My life's work has been in violence prevention and the empowerment of girls and women. I would like to invite you on a journey with me through the experiences and the stories that have shaped my work and have deeply informed who I am. I would like to speak about violence, specifically violence against women perpetrated by men. And I would really like to have us all take a moment before I begin and think of a good man. A man that you know you can trust. Hold that image. This talk is not about him. Fact, most men don't hurt women and children. This talk refers to the ones that do. And so, the journey begins. I was the third girl, not born a boy, in a family of 6 girls. I was raised in a cafe and a general store and a gas station called the Last Chance Cafe. Last chance to eat and gas up before heading north. Last chance to have a happy childhood. I could say that my work began with a self-defense class in my basement in 1976, but the truth is, my work began before that, long before that, in my childhood. My father was a rageaholic. I not only was the target of violence, but I also witnessed it, which is a kind of a double whammy because we now know that children who witness abuse internalize it and carry it forward much the same way. One of the most damaging impacts of this kind of abuse is the damage to our personal boundaries. I felt like I had my no stolen from me. I had it knocked right out of me. And I developed a deep belief that somehow my body could be violated and I could do nothing about it. Story. I became pregnant. Got is far too active a word for my part in it. When I was 15. First guy I ever dated out of high school. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I didn't say anything. It just happened. Story. I didn't date for a long time after I had my baby. And when I dated a guy who was 10 years older than I was. He was so charming. He used to call me sweetheart. On the day of the date, I got all dressed up. I was so excited. He came to pick me up in his hot car, and he drove me straight to a motel where he anally raped me. Story. I didn't date for a long time after that. And when I did, I thought I was choosing a good boyfriend from a good family. And he got very drunk one night, and he held me hostage in his parents' cabin in the woods, where he beat me and assaulted me until 5 in the morning when he finally passed out, and I was able to get away. By the time I was 19 years old, I had had tongues, hands, objects, and penises forced into every opening in my young body. And through that experience, I really did begin to develop this sense that I somehow deserved it. Fact, I knew all those men and I trusted them. Fact, 85% of women will be assaulted by someone she knows. 1 out of 3 women will be sexually assaulted in her lifetime. I would like to make a shift now to where the healing began. And in order to do that, we need to fast forward into my early 20s. And I was introduced to martial arts. I was so crazy for it. I could not get enough of it. And it was amazing to me that I had no clue that learning how to fight back had anything to do with the self-defense issues in my childhood. It was all underground for me. Now, the minute I learned any skill at all, I felt compelled to teach my sisters, which I did. And over the years, my sisters have become all the female beings on this planet. I, unbeknownst to me, had begun the deep, blind movement toward my own healing, the way a mole tunnels forward in the dark, the way a baby chick pecks its way out of its shell. I was introduced to the work of Joseph Campbell at some point in my journey, and he's the man who coined the phrase, he's a famous mythologist, he coined the phrase, follow your bliss. He uses the word marga. This is an ancient word, and it means the trail an animal leaves. And what Campbell says is that if you follow that trail, you will end up in the animal's den. And there, you will meet your deepest spiritual source, your true self. I don't think that my stories are unusual. As you can imagine, over 3.5 decades, I have heard thousands of stories, all of them different and unique, and yet I began to detect a common thread. At the end of a story that a girl or woman would share with me, inevitably she would say, I felt it. I knew something was wrong. And then she ignored that voice. Because as girls and women, we are socialized to ignore that voice, to second guess, to doubt our truth. In fact, we are told that we're being paranoid. Yes, and that in fact, perhaps even a little anti-male for even thinking it. After all, he's such a nice guy. I know him. He would never. And so, over the years, I began to practice and cultivate a way of listening to that voice. I began to learn to trust that voice. I began to recognize that voice the way a baby zebra recognizes the unique pattern of stripes on her mother's body. I stopped second-guessing. I learned to trust, and I learned to name that voice, wise woman. Now, before I could move out into the world and fully embrace and embody my wise woman, I had to meet two other characters, two other aspects of myself. I'm going to begin here with the little one, the child. We all have heard the term inner child. Well, the child is nice, polite, trusting, terrified, and has no voice. She's an easy target. So I had to learn to take her and create a safe place in my heart for her and tuck her there and say, you stay there, I'll be back later. Now, the minute I had my child tucked safely in her safe place, this other energy began to rise in me. What are you looking at? What are you looking at? You've got to be kidding me. You take those eyes and you pull them back in your head or I'll do it for you. Yeah. And I call her the bitch. Story. The first time I ever met my bitch, the first time I was ever called a bitch, it was a guy I was babysitting for. 3 times when I got in that guy's car, he exposed his penis. The first time I'm staring out the window and I'm feeling really nervous and I said to myself, well, maybe he doesn't know his penis is showing. The second time I said, well, maybe the zipper on his pants is broken. The third time I didn't know what to say to myself. And when I got in the house, that man attacked me. He threw me down. He started to rip at my clothing. And I reached up into my mind for an answer, and I reached and I reached and I reached. And I found something. Just ignore him. And I began to panic. I began to panic. This is one of the worst moments in my life. And there I am. I can't breathe. I'm hyperventilating. I'm panicking. And some young part of myself, like my teenage self, just was so grossed out by this guy trying to kiss me, I was pulling my face away. And he put his arm on my throat. And he cut off my wind. And then I had this thought, I could die. And when I had that thought, something changed. And it changed in my body. A heat rose up in me, and my face was hot and burning, and these words were in my mind, and they said, "How dare you?" And my hand flew up like it belonged to somebody else, and I tore the skin off his face, my fingernail catching on his eyeball. And I got up, and I'm running out the door, and he says, "My eye, you bitch, my eye." And I'm running, and I'm thinking, bitch, yeah. I loved my bitch. I took her everywhere with me. Oh, I got into so much trouble over the next few weeks. I had to sit my bitch down and have a little chat with her. I said, "I love you, honey. Thank you so much for saving my life. I honor you. I always want you to be a part of me, but you don't get to run the show. Back, bitch, back." And so I have my child safe. And I have my bitch back. And now my wise woman can rise up. Wise woman stands grounded. She holds her power. She speaks her truth without fear and without anger. She uses direct, unflinching, unwavering eye contact. And she has a voice. And she says, "No." I said no. I said no. Wise woman. Here's what I know. One of our greatest fears as women and girls is that if we do stand up for ourselves in that really empowered way, that really direct and strong way, that we will somehow make the situation worse. That is what stops us, that fear. Here's what I know. I know that people who hurt other people, be it the bully or the rapist, it doesn't matter. People who hurt other people require an easy target because of how broken they are, how powerless they are and small they are on the inside. I also know, and it's important to note, that people who are abused, not all people who are abused pass that abuse on. Many of them find the courage to share their stories and to get help, and they heal. So we need to get our stories out. One teenage girl said to me, "I went out into a field and I told a flower, does that work?" Yes, that's a beautiful start. Tell a flower, tell your doll, tell your teddy, write it down. And eventually we need to take that story, we need to hand it off to somebody who can help us. And the healing begins. We need to get our stories out. We can push them down, we can push them away, we can forget about them entirely. But I will say to you, they do not go away. When we hold them on the inside, they begin to poison us. They begin to spread, and they begin to solidify into this core belief that we deserved what we got. Fact. Most women who are assaulted, most, maybe even all, believe that it's their fault. And so I developed these two scenarios to help uproot that belief. Scenario one, a teenage girl really having a really difficult time in her life, and she gets really loaded, and she goes to a party. And she walks in, and it's all guys. Now, the guys that we thought of, that I asked you to imagine at the beginning of this talk, the good man, that's who's at the party without exception. That girl gets up on the table and she's dancing and she's taking her clothes off. What happens? Yes, she is safe because they help and protect, because that is what good men do. Now let's do it again. It's exactly the same scenario, same girl, same everything, exactly the same. And it's a room full of men. But it's a room full of men not one good man in the room. And she's up on that table and she's taken her clothes off. Now what happens to her? Yeah. What is the difference between those two scenarios? Because there's only one difference. Yeah, the men. So open to this as much as you can. If there's no rapist in the room, there is no rape. If there's no rapist in the room, there is no rape. It wasn't my fault, and it wasn't yours either. Over the years, as I follow my marga, because it's an ongoing journey, I have begun to realize that this work is not so much about my personal healing anymore, but it's kind of become a healing force that has a life of its own, and it travels out into the world with its own wings. And so, that healing force has brought me here to this moment. And in this moment, I can stand fully in my truth and quote the famous poet and storyteller Maya Angelou, because when I heard this quote, it resonated in my bones. I would take nothing from my journey now. In oneness, thank you for listening.